I had always looked forward to the simple things in life, the small moments that meant the most. Today I was expecting something just like that. A birthday card from my son, David. It had been a tradition for as long as I could remember. A simple card, some scribbled words inside, maybe a heartfelt note that brought me back to all those years of raising him. How proud I was of the man he had become. But when I opened the envelope, I froze. It wasn't a card. It was a bill from my own children. The words on the paper swirled before my eyes. At first, I thought it was a mistake, maybe a typo. But as I read it again, the realization sank in like a stone in my chest. The bill was for rent, for staying in my own home. A house I built, Henry and I, brick by brick, room by room. Each corner of this place held memories. Each wall witnessed laughter, love, and tears. Our 3 children grew up here. They carved their names in the oak tree out back. This house was everything to us. It was our home. And now, they were charging me rent to live in it. I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled as I held the paper, the edges of the bill starting to curl with the weight of what it represented. My mind raced, trying to make sense of this. Could this really be happening? I reached for the phone, my hands unsteady, and dialed David's number. My heart pounded. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe he forgot to sign the card, or this was all some cruel joke. But when his wife Rachel answered, something in her tone told me this wasn't a mistake. "Hi, Margaret," she said, her voice almost too sweet, like she was talking to a stranger. "We were wondering when you'd get that. Things are tight, and it's only fair everyone contributes." Fair? Fair? The word hit me like a slap across the face. I could feel the anger building inside me, my chest tight. All those years of sacrifice. Everything I'd done for them, for their futures. Every penny I saved, every holiday I hosted, every birthday I celebrated. And now they were asking me to pay to stay in the place I'd given them. The place I had worked so hard for. The place that had been my life, my home, and my sanctuary. I asked to speak to David, but Rachel just laughed. "He's busy. Just read the letter," she said. "We expect your payment by the 1st. I couldn't believe it. My own children, treating me like a stranger, a burden, a liability, a way to make money. I sat there in silence, the phone pressed to my ear, my mind spinning in disbelief. I was no longer Martha, their mother, the one who had always been there, who had given everything. I was just some tenant. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat there staring at the bill in my hand, and I realized something deep inside me had broken. They thought I would just roll over, that I'd accept this because I was old, because they thought I didn't have a voice anymore. But they were wrong. I wasn't weak. I wasn't broken. I was just silent, but not anymore. I put down the phone, took a deep breath, and made a decision. I wasn't going to let them take my home. I wasn't going to let them take my dignity. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. It was time to fight back. When I close my eyes, I can still picture the first time Henry and I stood in front of the land we'd bought together. It was a small plot, nothing too grand, just a few acres outside of town. But to us, it was everything. We were young then, in our 30s, with stars in our eyes and dreams of a life built with our own hands. It wasn't much at first, just the foundation and a couple of walls. But we poured everything into it, every penny we earned, every hour we worked. Henry was a mechanic, always with grease under his nails, and I worked as a secretary at the local school. We didn't have much, but we had love, and that was enough for us. We'd walk out to that plot every weekend, talking about how the house would look, how we'd fill it with the sounds of children's laughter and the smell of dinners simmering on the stove. We knew it wouldn't be easy, but we knew we could do it, together. I remember Henry's smile when he'd tell me, "One day, this will be our home. Our kids will grow up here. This is where we'll build our memories." And those memories, they started coming, slowly, as we built the house. It wasn't just a structure. It was ours. Each room had a story. The living room, where we spent countless evenings curled up by the fire, reading books to the kids. It was where we would all gather on Christmas Eve, the tree twinkling with lights, and we'd drink hot cocoa as Henry played the piano, and we sang carols together. Oh, how the kids loved that. They'd make snowflakes out of paper and hang them on the windows, imagining how Santa would come down the chimney and leave presents by the tree. The smell of cinnamon, pine, and roasted turkey would fill the air, and I'd look around, thankful for the life we had created. And then there were the bedrooms. I still remember the first night each of them slept in their own rooms. David, Samuel, and Emily, all three of them so small, their little feet pattering across the floor as they ran in and out of their rooms, sharing stories, playing games. David was the oldest, always with his toy trucks and his wild imagination. He'd tell stories about building roads and bridges, his little hands making signs in the air as he acted out scenes. Samuel, always quiet but full of curiosity, would sit at the kitchen table and draw pictures of the things he imagined. And Emily, our little sunshine, would run through the house, her laughter filling the rooms. She was the one who loved baking with me, stirring the cookie dough while Henry would sit at the table, reading the newspaper with a quiet smile on his face. I could never forget the first steps they all took in that house. Each one of them, steadying themselves with the help of the walls, their hands reaching for me as they took those wobbly steps toward me. "Come here, Mama." I'd call, and they'd fall into my arms, their faces lighting up with pure joy. Oh, and the holidays were always so special. Thanksgiving dinners, where we'd gather at that big old oak table we had saved for years to buy. Henry would carve the turkey while I'd bring out the mashed potatoes and green beans, and the kids would fight over who got the last slice of pumpkin pie. It was always the same ritual: laughter, stories, a little chaos, and so much love. The house was full of it. You could feel it in the air, in every corner. I still remember the first time we put up a Christmas tree in the living room. The scent of pine and fresh candles filled the house, and David, Samuel, and Emily eagerly helped me hang the ornaments. Emily loved the little angel that went at the top, and she insisted that we name her Crystal. It became a tradition to hang that angel every year, no matter how much time passed. And then there was the garden. Henry loved to plant flowers, and I'd help him tend to the vegetables. It became a family project. The kids would run barefoot through the rows of vegetables, picking tomatoes, carrots, and cucumbers. Samuel, always the quieter one, would bring me wildflowers he picked on the edge of the yard, telling me, "These are for you, Mom, because you're the prettiest flower of them all." Looking back, those were the days that defined everything for me. The house wasn't just where we lived. It was where we grew. It was the place where everything we worked for, everything we built, came to life. It was filled with memories of love, joy, sacrifice, and so much laughter. Our love was written into every brick, every corner, every floorboard, and I poured into it. The years passed, and the kids grew. We didn't have much in terms of money or things, but we had enough. Enough for them to have clothes, to go to school, to have a home. I remember working late into the night, After Henry came home from the shop, just to make ends meet, I'd go from the secretary job at the school to cleaning offices at night to make sure there was always enough to put food on the table. It wasn't easy, but we made it work. And then, when the kids were old enough to go to college, Henry and I both knew we had to do what it took to make sure they had the best chance at life. We sacrificed our own desires, our vacations, our comforts, even our retirement savings, so they could have opportunities we never had. We didn't want them to struggle the way we did. And so, we sent them off, one by one, to school. They were our pride and joy, and Henry and I worked hard to ensure they didn't have to face the same financial struggles we did. The house was always full of love, but as the kids grew, we began to notice the change. Slowly they became busier, with their own lives. They started moving away, and the visits grew less frequent. I didn't mind at first. I knew they had their own families, their own responsibilities. But it was the little things that began to fade. The phone calls became shorter, the visits less frequent. And as I grew older, I realized just how much I missed the days when our home was filled with the sound of their laughter. When Henry passed away, everything changed. He had been my rock, my partner, and now I was left to carry the weight of our life together. At first, the kids came around more often, and it felt like warmth was returning. David would visit, Emily would call, Samuel helped with yard work. But over time, even that began to change. It started with small signs, the first being David asking for a loan to fix his car. The requests grew more frequent and soon turned into demands. When I hesitated, they would guilt me. "Don't you want your grandkids to have everything you didn't?" I gave until I had nothing left to give, but it didn't feel like love anymore. As I sat staring at the bill they sent me, I realized how hollow all my sacrifices were. The love, the years I spent building this house, it all meant nothing to them. They took it all, leaving me with only memories. The subtle changes in our relationship became more noticeable as time passed. Missed phone calls, forgotten visits, comments slipping through unnoticed. I didn't want to believe it, but I could feel it, the coldness creeping in. David first asked for money for a car repair. I didn't hesitate. He was my son, after all. But then it didn't stop. The requests became regular. Tuition for the grandkids, mortgage payments. When I hesitated, I saw the frustration in his eyes. The warmth was gone, replaced by something colder, more demanding. I felt guilty, like I was failing them, like I wasn't doing enough. It wasn't just David. Rachel's attitude changed too. She had seemed kind at first, offering to cook or inviting me to join them. But soon her kindness felt more like manipulation. "It's for the grandkids," she'd say, with a touch of mock sweetness, whenever I said no. I began to feel like an outsider in my own home. David's absence grew more frequent, and when he was around, it was clear he was distracted, preoccupied with Rachel. It felt like I was losing them both, bit by bit. Samuel, who used to visit every Sunday, started to withdraw too. One day he stopped by in a hurry, barely acknowledging me, and when I asked about his wife, he rushed off with a vague excuse. I felt like they were avoiding me, and the distance between us only grew. The house itself started to change. My favorite chair was moved to the basement. My old family pictures were replaced with photos of David's family. I tried to convince myself it was just change, but deep down, I knew the house no longer felt like mine. And Rachel, always with her polite smile, reassured me when I asked about my chair. "We just needed the space," she said. But I saw through it. The resentment was there, in the way she spoke, the way she avoided looking me in the eye. The warmth had disappeared from the house, replaced by a cold indifference that I couldn't ignore. I was no longer the mother they respected, but just someone to tolerate. It wasn't just the physical changes that hurt. It was the emotional isolation. Family gatherings, once filled with laughter, now felt like events I wasn't part of. David and Rachel would talk over me, barely acknowledging my questions. The kids played in the next room, but I couldn't reach them anymore. Then came the holidays. I had always hosted Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter, but this year Rachel insisted on hosting Thanksgiving at her house, telling me to relax because I'd done so much. At first, I thought it was a one-time thing. But as time passed, I realized it was the start of something bigger. The quiet exclusion, the distancing. I began to feel like a guest in my own home. It wasn't just the food I wasn't invited to. It was the laughter, the stories, shared moments that used to be mine, now theirs. It wasn't until Thanksgiving that it truly hit me. After spending the morning cooking, preparing my famous stuffing and cranberry sauce, I went downstairs expecting to join them. But they had already started eating. David and Rachel were at the head of the table, surrounded by their kids, laughing and eating like nothing had changed. No one had called me down. I stood in the doorway, smelling the turkey, hearing the familiar sounds of my family. But it wasn't my family anymore. Rachel looked up, startled. "Oh, we thought you were resting," she said with a cold, forced smile. "You've done so much for us." But I could see how she looked at me, like I was a burden, something they no longer wanted to deal with. I turned and went back upstairs, not a word spoken. That night I ate alone in my room, a bowl of cereal, cold and tasteless. The emptiness in my heart mirrored the emptiness I felt in the house. That night, I realized the truth. I wasn't part of the family anymore. I wasn't Martha, their mother. I was just the old woman who lived upstairs, a guest, a burden. And the worst part, I let them do this to me. I let myself shrink, believing it was my duty to give endlessly, to sacrifice without question. Because that's what mothers do, right? But in the end, I didn't just lose myself. I lost my dignity, and that was something I couldn't let go of. It was a quiet morning when I opened the envelope. I had been expecting a letter, a card, anything, really. But when I saw the return address, my heart skipped. It was from David's law office. I hoped it was about the house, but when I tore open the envelope, the words hit me like a punch to the gut. It was a bill charging me rent for staying in my own home. The words blurred before my eyes. The rent for the last 6 months came to nearly $4,800. The house I had built with Henry, the house that held our family's love and memories. Now they were charging me rent to stay in it. I was furious. How dare they? I had sacrificed everything for them, worked myself to the bone, and now they were asking me to pay to stay in the house that belonged to me. I held the bill in my trembling hands, trying to catch my breath. My blood began to boil. How could David do this? How could Rachel manipulate him into thinking this was acceptable? They were turning me into a stranger in my own home. And worse, they thought I was too weak to fight back. I ran my hand over my face, the tears stinging my eyes, but I didn't cry. Not yet. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I knew what I had to do, and I wouldn't let them see how much this hurt. Not when I was preparing for the fight ahead. With a shaky hand, I picked up the phone and dialed David's number. It rang several times before he picked up, his voice groggy, like he was just waking up. "Hi, Mom," he said, his tone flat, as if everything was normal. "David," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What is this?" I held up the bill, though I knew he couldn't see it. "Why did you send me a bill for rent? What is this?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint sound of rustling, the background noise of a busy morning. Mom," he said, his voice slightly more guarded now. "It's just a formality. We just need you to start paying rent, you know? Things are tight, and we're just trying to cover the costs of everything." I felt rage building in my chest, hot and fierce. "You're charging me rent to live in the house I built? I raised you, David. I gave everything for you. I put you through school, gave up my comfort, and now you're telling me I have to pay rent in my own home?" David hesitated. "It's just temporary, Mom. We didn't want to burden you, but it's only fair you contribute. We can't keep going like this." I cut him off. "Fair? You think it's fair to charge me rent for the house Henry and I built together? You think it's fair to do this to me?" There was a long silence before I continued, my voice trembling. "What happened to you, David? The son who used to check in? Who used to ask for advice? What happened to the man who said family was everything?" His voice shifted, defensive. "Mom, it's not like that. We're just trying to make ends meet and—" I interrupted again. "I don't need to understand, David. You've made it clear how you feel about me. You think I'm just some old woman who's in the way." I could hear Rachel's voice in the background, but I didn't want to hear her. "This isn't just about money," I said, my voice cold. "It's about respect. You and Rachel don't see me anymore. You pushed me aside, and now you want me to pay for the home I gave my life for. I won't stand for it." I paused, gripping the phone tightly. "You want rent? Fine, you'll get it. But not the way you think." David's voice trembled. "What are you talking about, Mom?" I didn't answer him. I hung up, staring at the bill in my hands. I was shaking, but not from fear, from anger. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. I would fight back, even if it meant going to court. The next days felt like a storm brewing inside me, the rage and confusion threatening to consume me. But I had to stay composed. I couldn't react impulsively. I needed to think, plan, and prepare. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. David, Rachel, no one. I needed time to strategize. I dialed the lawyer's number quietly, hoping no one would overhear. Claire Martinez answered on the second ring, calm and professional. After listening to my story, she agreed to help, telling me she'd need to look over the documents before advising me further. I wasn't going to let them take everything I had built. I wasn't just going to roll over. I had spent my life fighting for what was rightfully mine, and I wasn't about to stop now. Top of form bottom of Form I hung up the phone and sat in the quiet of my living room, the silence settling around me like a blanket. I wasn't sure what to do next, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't let them win. I couldn't let them walk all over me and take my home. This house was everything. It was my history, my sanctuary, my safe place. I wasn't going to let anyone erase that. Over the next few days, I spent my time gathering everything I could find. Papers, receipts, old records, anything that might help me in my fight. I searched through the filing cabinet, flipping through old bills, tax returns, and legal documents. I dug through Henry's old boxes, looking for the original deeds and contracts. Each piece I found was a small victory, a tiny piece of evidence I could use. I didn't know what I was going to need yet, but I wanted to have everything at my fingertips when the time came. I made lists. I wrote down every conversation I could remember, Every moment when David or Rachel had said something that now seemed like a clue, a sign of their true intentions. I even went through my old journals, pages filled with memories of raising my children, my hopes and dreams for them, my sacrifices. I didn't know why I was going through it all, but it felt like it mattered. It felt like I needed to remember who I was, who we were, before they tried to take it all away from me. Each night after I had finished my work for the day, I would sit at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. My fingers would lightly trace the rim of the mug as I thought about the next steps. What would they do when they found out? How would they react? I had a million questions swirling in my mind, but I couldn't answer them yet, not until I was ready. During the day, I kept up appearances. I went about my routine as if everything was fine. I still cooked, still cleaned, still took care of the house. It felt like a small rebellion in itself, to go on as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I wasn't just the mother anymore. I wasn't just the old woman upstairs who quietly accepted things. I was preparing for a battle. I was getting ready to take back what was mine. I noticed little things happening around the house during this time. Things that felt like signs, though I wasn't sure what they meant. One afternoon, I found a letter from David in the mailbox. It wasn't addressed to me, but I recognized the handwriting. I could feel my pulse quicken as I read it. It was a request for some of the money I had lent him a few months ago. The tone was casual, polite, as if nothing had changed between us. As if he didn't realize that things had changed in ways he couldn't possibly understand. I tucked the letter into a drawer and didn't speak a word of it to anyone. It was a small thing, but it felt like a reminder of what was happening. A reminder that they thought they had the upper hand, that they thought they could still control me. But they couldn't, not anymore. Every night, after everyone else had gone to bed, I would sit in the dark, quietly preparing. I wasn't sure when the moment would come, but I knew it was coming. I could feel it in my bones. The quiet moments of reflection were just as important as the evidence I was gathering. They were helping me find the strength I needed to stand, tall when the time came. I was no longer the woman who would sit back and let things happen to her. I was taking control. It was during one of these late-night sessions that I had a realization. I wasn't just fighting for my house. I was fighting for my dignity, for the respect I had lost over the years, for the love I had given that had been thrown away. They had thought they could strip me of everything. My home, my sense of self, my place in their lives. But I wasn't going to let them. With each passing day, I grew more certain of my plan. I started reaching out to other people, quietly. I spoke to friends, to neighbors, anyone who might have seen anything or heard anything. I needed to know if I was missing something. Were there any other clues I could gather? Any small detail that would help me in the fight ahead? And then there was the lawyer, Claire. She called me one evening after reviewing the documents I had sent. "Margaret," she said, her voice steady, but I could hear the undertones of confidence. "You've got a case. We can move forward with this." I remember feeling something shift inside me when she said those words. We can move forward. It wasn't just the beginning of the legal process. It was the beginning of taking my life back, of reclaiming what was mine. I sat quietly after the phone call, staring out the window as the last light of day faded into evening. For the first time in what felt like years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It wasn't loud or explosive, but it was there, steady and true. I wasn't alone in this fight, and I wasn't powerless. The waiting was still hard. The uncertainty still gnawed at me, But I knew that soon enough the storm would break. The suspense of what was coming next only heightened the resolve I felt. I was ready to stand up for myself, ready to show them who I really was. I wasn't just Martha, the old woman upstairs. I was a force to be reckoned with, and I was going to make sure they saw that. The air was thick with tension that afternoon. The house was full of people, voices overlapping, laughter echoing, the clink of silverware against porcelain plates. A typical family gathering, or so they thought. They had no idea that this was going to be anything but ordinary. I had never imagined the day would come when I would stand in front of my children like this. But today was different. Today, I wasn't just the mother, the grandmother, the silent figure in the background. Today I was going to make them see me, and I was going to make them feel it. I stood outside the front door for a moment, my hand resting lightly on the doorknob. The sound of laughter from within was almost deafening, and I could feel my pulse quicken in my chest. I wasn't sure how I was going to be received. Would they be shocked? Would they be angry? Would they try to talk me out of it? I had no answers. But I had come too far now to turn back. This was it. This was my moment. I had taken my time to prepare. I had gathered all the evidence I needed, worked with the lawyer, and made sure I was ready to stand my ground. I'd read through the legal documents over and over again, memorizing the key points, familiarizing myself with the language. It was like learning a new language, one I never thought I'd have to speak, but one I had to learn if I was going to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, the door swinging open quietly behind me. The room fell silent the moment I entered. All eyes turned toward me. David, Rachel, Samuel, Emily, and the kids, frozen in mid-laughter, forks halfway to their mouths. For a split second, no one spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator in the background. But even that seemed to fade away as they realized I wasn't there to join in the festivities. I wasn't there to play along. Rachel's eyes narrowed when she saw me. She smiled, but it was that cold, insincere smile I had come to recognize all too well. "Oh, Margaret, we didn't expect you down here. You're looking well." Her voice dripped with false politeness, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the tightness around her eyes. She wasn't as calm as she appeared. I stood there, for a moment, taking it all in. My family, my children, my grandchildren, the very people who had once been my everything, the ones I had given everything for. And now, they were the ones who had stripped me of my dignity, my respect, my place in the home I had built. I didn't speak at first. Instead, I let my presence hang in the air, the weight of it pressing down on all of us. They were all waiting for me to say something, but I didn't rush. I had all the time in the world now. The only sound was the soft shuffle of my shoes against the floor, a quiet reminder of the power I held in this moment. Finally, I pulled out the envelope I had been holding in my hand the entire time. The paper was thick, official, its contents folded neatly inside. I let it fall with a deliberate weight onto the kitchen table in front of David and Rachel, my eyes never leaving theirs. "This," I said, my voice calm but steady, "is the official notice to vacate the house. It's time for you to move out." There was a collective gasp from the room, the air growing thick with confusion, shock, and disbelief. David's face turned white, and Rachel's lips parted slightly, her hand frozen midair as she reached for her wineglass. The kids sat in stunned silence, unsure of what to make of the scene unfolding before them. Samuel, always the quiet one, looked back and forth between me and the others, his brow furrowed in silent concern. "What? What is this, Mom?" David asked, his voice trembling. the shock in his eyes palpable. He reached for the envelope, but I pulled it back just out of reach. You can't just... This is our house now. You gave it to us. You signed everything. This doesn't make sense. I stared at him, my heart pounding, but I didn't flinch. Your house? I repeated, letting the words hang in the air. Our house was never yours to take. You think you can just take it from me because I'm older? Because you think I'm too tired to fight back? I took a step forward, my voice firm now, a fire burning in my chest. No. You made a mistake. David. You and Rachel both did. You thought I wouldn't fight for what's mine. You thought I'd just sit back and let you take everything I built. But you were wrong. Rachel's face flushed with anger. You can't do this. This house was never yours to begin with. You signed everything. You gave us the deed. I didn't sign anything. I interrupted, my voice cutting through the air like a knife. I never signed the final papers. You took it behind my back, David. You tricked me, you and Rachel. You manipulated me. And now you think I'll just let you get away with it? I could see the panic starting to set in on their faces now. Rachel's hands trembled as she reached for the envelope, but I held it out of her grasp, my hand steady. She tried to speak again, but the words seemed to get stuck in her throat. She could see the determination in my eyes, the unwavering strength that I had found within myself. This house was never yours, Rachel. It was mine. It was Henry's and mine. I continued, my voice rising with every word. I worked my whole life for this, and I'm not going to let you take it away from me. You can't just push me aside like I'm some old woman who has no place here anymore. You're wrong. This is my house. And now, I'm taking it back. The room was silent now, every eye fixed on me. David was no longer looking at me with anger. Now he looked scared. He didn't know what to say. His mouth opened and closed, his chest rising and falling with quick breaths. He looked at Rachel, who was still trying to collect herself, but it was too late. The truth was out, and it was like a bomb had dropped in the middle of the room. The quiet, passive mother they had known, the burden, wasn't there anymore. I felt something shift in the room then, a change in the atmosphere, a sudden release of tension. For the first time, I could feel my family start to understand. I was no longer the weak, silent woman they thought they could control. I wasn't just standing up for my house anymore. I was standing up for myself, and they were beginning to see it. Get out, Rachel, I said quietly, my voice calm but unyielding. Get out and take David with you. I don't want you here anymore. Not in my house, not in my life. David opened his mouth to argue, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the look in my eyes, the way my hands were steady, the way I had finally found my voice after years of silence. Maybe it was the undeniable truth of the papers in front of him. He stood there for a long time, his face pale, the anger draining from his features. Finally, he nodded slowly, his lips trembling as he turned to Rachel. She didn't say anything, just stared at me for a moment before looking down at the table. And then, just like that, the confrontation was over. They were beaten, not by force, but by the truth. They had thought they could take everything I had, but they hadn't reckoned with the strength I still had left inside me. As they turned to leave, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I had done it. I had stood tall, and I had taken back what was mine. The storm had passed, and for the first time in years, I could breathe again. The house was mine, and with that, I had finally reclaimed my life. The dust had barely settled. From the confrontation, and the shock waves of that moment still lingered in the air. It was late the next afternoon when David called me. His voice on the other end of the line was no longer angry or defensive. It was quiet, almost tentative, like he didn't quite know how to approach me anymore. "Mom," he began, his voice soft. "I'm sorry. For everything." I sat down at the kitchen table, my hands folded in front of me. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, I just listened to the silence between us. There had been so many years where I had wanted to hear those words from him. Years of sacrifice, of giving, of enduring. But now, as I sat there, it was hard to know how to feel. The apology was long overdue, but it still felt like too little, too late. "Sorry for what, David?" I asked quietly. Not out of anger, but out of something deeper. Something that felt like a mix of sadness and weariness. "Sorry for betraying me? Sorry for thinking I was weak, for treating me like a burden?" I paused, my voice steady but firm. "Sorry for making me feel invisible in my own home?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing, the sound of him gathering his thoughts. And then finally, he spoke, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I never meant for it to go this far. I was under pressure. And Rachel," she kept pushing, kept making me think this was the only way. I let her convince me, and I let her take control. "But you were right. You were always right. You never deserved this." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the weight of his words settle over me. The apology wasn't perfect. It wasn't enough to undo the hurt, the years of feeling unappreciated and overlooked, but it was a start, a small, fragile step toward healing. "David," I said softly, my voice quieter now. "I know you didn't make these decisions alone, but you were a part of it, and you've got to live with that. I've had to live with the consequences of your choices, too." I paused, taking a deep breath. "But I'm not going to carry that weight anymore. Not for you. Not for anyone." There was a long silence after that. I could almost feel the distance between us, the space that had opened up not just in the house, but in our hearts. We had spent so many years together, built so many memories, and yet, in the end, this was what we had come to. A fractured relationship, the trust broken. But that was the reality now. Finally, David spoke again, his voice much softer than it had been before. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away, Mom. But I want you to know. I'll do better. I'll make things right. I'll fix this." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. I didn't know what the future held for us or if our relationship would ever be the same. But I knew this. I had finally taken back my dignity. I had finally reclaimed my strength. The conversation ended on a quiet note, and when I hung up the phone, I felt a weight lift from my chest. Not just because of the apology, but because I had finally made a decision for myself. I had fought for my respect, for my place in this world, and in the process, I had rediscovered something I had long forgotten: myself. As the days passed, I began to notice a change in the way David and his family treated me. The distance was still there, but it was smaller now. Emily, who had been distant for so long, started coming by more often. Samuel began calling just to check in, asking how I was doing. Slowly they were finding their way back, each of them reaching out in their own way. I didn't need grand gestures or apologies. What mattered to me now was the quiet respect, the acknowledgement that I wasn't just someone they could take advantage of, that I wasn't just their mother, but a woman who deserved to be treated with dignity. The healing process was slow, but it had begun. I didn't expect everything to change overnight. I didn't expect things to be perfect. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was me again. The battle for respect wasn't just about the house. It was about reclaiming my place, my voice, my life. And that, I realized, was worth more than any apology could ever be. It's been months now since that day. The day everything shifted. The house is quieter these days, but in the best way possible. I've reclaimed my peace, and with it, my space, both physical and emotional. When I walk through the door now, it feels different. It feels mine again. Not just a place I had to defend, but a home that has been transformed. The rooms are still, filled with memories, but they no longer weigh me down. I've let go of the bitterness that once hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Slowly, over time, I've cleared out the old furniture, the remnants of Rachel's taste, the things that felt foreign in my own space. The house has taken on a new life, one that reflects me, reflects who I am now. The colors are lighter, the furniture more comfortable, and the energy. It's peaceful. It feels like a sanctuary again, not a battlefield. The quiet, soft hum of the house is soothing. The pictures of Henry and me, our children when they were young, are back on the walls. The old rocking chair that Henry loved, the one that I used to sit in when I was tired from the day's work, is back where it belongs, by the fireplace. I sit there now in the evenings, sipping my tea, listening to the soft crackle of the fire. As it burns, the warmth of it curling around me like a comforting embrace. The house feels whole again, and so do I. I've stopped waiting for the phone calls, for the apologies that were never quite enough. What I needed most wasn't their words. It was the space to heal, to come to terms with what had happened, and to find my own peace. The family, little by little, has started to see me in a different light. They don't look at me as a burden anymore, as the woman who needs to be taken care of. They see me as a person of strength, someone who has lived through more than they can imagine. And yet, here I am, still standing. They see me finally, as I am. David comes by sometimes now, but it's different. The tension is gone. There's no longer that awkwardness hanging between us. We talk. He listens. And when he leaves, there's no bitterness left in me. Just a quiet hope that maybe we're building something new. Not the family we once were, but something more authentic. Something grounded in respect. Emily visits more often too, sometimes with a cup of coffee, sometimes just to sit in silence. I've stopped needing explanations or apologies. I've stopped needing them to fix what they broke. What's been healed can't be undone. The past is still there, of course. The memories of what I endured, of the betrayal, are still a part of me. But they no longer define me. What defines me now is the strength I've found in myself. The quiet, unwavering strength that kept me going when it felt like I was losing everything. I look at my reflection sometimes, in the mirror by the front door, and I don't see a broken woman anymore. I see someone who has learned to stand tall, to speak her truth, and to reclaim her life. This house, this home, is a symbol of that journey. It's a space where love still exists, where memories can be cherished without the weight of resentment. I've let go of the past, of the bitterness, and now I'm moving forward. It's not perfect, but it's mine. And in that, there's peace, real peace, the kind that comes from knowing who you are and what you're worth, no matter what anyone else thinks. And that, I've learned, is enough.